Where can you find the worst income inequality in America? There are many communities where the haves and the have-nots are living right next to each other, from San Francisco to New York and all across rural America. But the starkest inequality is actually here in Puerto Rico, an island known for its beautiful beaches, its tropical weather, and also for a shocking 43% poverty rate. This poverty exists side by side with some of the most extreme wealth in the whole world. Since 2012, more than 5,000 crypto traders, real estate developers, and other wealthy Americans have moved to the island.
I'm moving to Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico is a place that's near and dear to my heart because it's where my family's from. It's where I lived as a kid and have some of my earliest memories. Yep, that's me in the red and white bikini. So I wanted to find out, how did the gap between rich and poor on this beautiful island become so wide? And this video took me down a journey to a much larger question that affects all of us. What happens when a government surrenders itself entirely to the 1%? To answer that question, I'll talk to local residents, investigative journalists, lawmakers, and activists who've been digging into this issue for years. This is The Classroom for More Perfect Union. And today, we're talking about how America's elites are plundering Puerto Rico. Before we get to these guys,
I'm moving to Puerto Rico.
We decided to come to Puerto Rico.
I live in Puerto Rico, and I haven't been wearing closed-toed shoes since Thanksgiving.
we have to go back and give you a brief history of Puerto Rico's financial relationship with the mainland. For a large part of Puerto Rico's history, the economy was agricultural, relying on rich sugar plantations, which were exploited first by Spanish colonists and later by American bankers. Then in the mid-1940s, the local government wanted to modernize, so they used tax incentives to attract investment from industries in mainland America. In 1976, the American government passed Section 936, which exempted U.S. companies operating in Puerto Rico from paying federal income tax. This led to a sort of economic dependence on the mainland that proved catastrophic in 1996, when the U.S. government decided to phase out Section 936 over a 10-year period. Without the generous tax breaks, foreign investment began to flee the island. By 2006, a recession hit that's still going on today. In order to make up for the losses and provide citizens with basic necessities, the Puerto Rican government borrowed heavily, racking up $72 billion in debt. Puerto Rico couldn't file for bankruptcy because, as a U.S. territory, it doesn't have the same insolvency laws as states do. So in 2016, the Obama administration passed a law called Promesa, appointing a widely hated Financial Oversight Management Board to determine ways the island can pay back the debt, imposing severe austerity measures, which have seriously pissed people off and hurt locals. As a journalist, I've worked on many stories on the island, and over the last decade, I saw several different crises compound. A recession, followed by a debt crisis, a natural disaster, severe austerity measures, another natural disaster, and all of this left the island reeling, in debt, and in need of economic stimulus. This set the stage for one of the most short-sighted efforts the local government has taken yet to attract money from the mainland. In 2012, conservative Governor Luis Fortuño's administration passed two laws, Act 20 and Act 22. These laws offered massive tax breaks to private investors. In 2019, they were rolled into one law called Act 60. Under Act 60, certain companies pay a 4% corporate tax rate, and they don't pay any taxes on income from capital gains, interest, or dividends. That's why these guys are moving here.
I moved to Puerto Rico first and foremost for the huge tax incentives.
Any money you make from investing is going to be taxed at a big fat zero.
It's one vertical. Yeah. It's one. It's a big one.
It's 96% of a big one, which ironically is the same amount of money you keep every year if you move to Puerto Rico.
To qualify, you have to buy a home and donate money to a local charity. And most importantly, you have to move to Puerto Rico and actually live there at least 6 months out of the year.
We live in California.
We lived in California.
Lived. Well, we still do.
No, we lived in California.
We lived in California.
So how has this influx of rich Americans affected the island? Margarita Gandia is a longtime resident and real estate agent in Old San Juan, which is one of the most impacted neighborhoods.
Well, we don't have a neighborhood anymore. The only thing you'll find is gates with a lot of locks.
Many Act 60 beneficiaries have been buying up properties and turning them into short-term rentals, and they're doing it so aggressively that they've completely transformed the housing market.
Un apartamento de renta de 2 habitaciones amueblado con su balcón, buena localización, por lo menos va a ser $4,500 o $5,000 mensuales.
These are Manhattan prices. The median income in Puerto Rico is less than $22,000 a year for an entire family.
Y aquí hay gente que pueden pagar.
Rentas corporativas.
Que todo era en Section 8.
Es ahora mismo
¿Quién lo compró?
es una corporación, una LLC.
Y que esta gente la van a desplazar.
Los mudan a otro edificio de Section 8 fuera del viejo San Juan. Como agarrar una plantita, levantarla, se quedan las raíces aquí y tratar de moverlas a otro lado, ¿no?
And it's not just housing that Act 60 investors are buying up. They're snatching up other public buildings too, and they're getting a massive discount. I went to the neighborhood of Puerta de Tierra with Adrián González Costa. He's a spokesperson for Puerto Rico's Independence Party and a vocal critic of the tax incentives.
The school that was closed in 2013 was sold to another Act 22 investor for short-term rental. It's a 3-story building and it was sold for $500,000. This is prime real estate here. It was sold on 2018, but they haven't done anything.
There's books in there, a desk there that looks like that was maybe the teacher's desk.
It's full of trash. So the myth that they are buying empty buildings, improving them, it's a myth.
It's just garbage outside.
There is a building next to the school, and the most cheap apartment there is near the $1 million. So a whole school, $500,000, and across the street, an apartment for $1 million. It was a gift. It's like a donation for the investor.
So what was the logic here? How was luring rich people in with massive tax breaks supposed to help the people of Puerto Rico?
Influx of capital and jobs. These are type A individuals. They don't sit around watching TV all day. They want to go out and they're investing in the local economy.
So how is that going? Luis Valentín Ortiz is a journalist with the Centro de Periodismo Investigativo, a nonprofit media organization that conducted an investigation into Act 60 and its predecessor, Act 22.
Back in 2021, we started to receive a lot of tips and complaints about individuals who had tax incentives. So we came up with a database on all of the people who has this incentive, and we decided to take a closer look into them and see, do they have a company? Are they creating jobs?
What kind of jobs have these tax beneficiaries created?
Mostly related to themselves. For example, a chauffeur, somebody who cleans the house, a nana that will take care of the kids. We actually spoke to one of them, and their stories were horrible as well because they were mistreated. You know, they were not paid well.
And the jobs weren't just poorly paid. There weren't very many of them.
The last study by the government showed Act 22 only created 40,000 jobs. The average income of those was in the range of $19,000 yearly.
$19,000 a year.
Yeah.
Which is below the poverty line.
Of course, yes.
If you talk to the government, they'll come back and say, just because they're here, we're winning. Just because he goes and spends 20, 30, whatever in a restaurant, we're winning. But that's, you know, if you talk to some economists, they will say that that's a horrible way to see the whole thing.
It's a horrible way to see it because it doesn't account for all the costs that these tax breaks are imposing on the island. Act 60 beneficiaries are encroaching on public space, too. We spoke with Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, a longtime advocate of Puerto Rican issues.
One reason I'm very passionate about issues regarding Puerto Rico is because my family's from Puerto Rico. I grew up around Puerto Rico, and my family's still there. And seeing the degree of inequality on the island and the way that people in Puerto Rico have been starved of their public resources, all because the wealthy are free riding on public systems and not paying into them, is something that is just so incredibly unacceptable. Puerto Rico has a very sacred principle that is enshrined in law that all beaches are public land. But a lot of these speculators and developers are starting to